for 1,000 years and more, the wall had never fallen. I was standing on the wall the last morning it held. My name is Cassian Vale. I have been alive for a very long time, long enough to have been there. I keep the things people handed me and never came back for. Tonight, I'll show you one. This is a key. Iron, heavier than it looks, forged for a lock, no bigger than a book. It opened one small door in the walls of Constantinople, the greatest wall human beings ever built. A door so minor that the empire it protected barely remembered it was there. The man who carried it was named Petros, and he kept that little gate the way other men keep a vineyard, daily, gently, without glory. He liked to say the empire had 1,000 doors and God watched the small ones. He was wrong about somebody watching. The cannon did not take Constantinople. Everyone says the cannon, and the cannon was real. I felt it speak through the soles of my boots. But guns had come against those walls before, and the walls had eaten armies for 10 centuries. Avars, Arabs, Bulgars, the sea itself. What took the city was the wall, not its stones, its record. A wall that has always held turns in the end, from stone into a belief. And beliefs do not stop iron. They only stop the people behind them from imagining the morning after. I watched those walls rise. I watched them hold for 1,000 years, and I loved them the way you love a strong old tree. And on the 29th of May, 1453, I stood on their broken crest and understood that the strongest thing about them had killed the city they kept. You have to see what was at stake. Constantinople was not a city. It was the last room of an empire that had once been the world. Rome had fallen in the west 1,000 years before, but here, behind the great land wall of Theodosius, Rome simply refused to finish dying. Gold mosaics, the dome of Hagia Sophia, so vast that new visitors wept under it. And across the city's landward neck, the wall, a moat, then a low wall, then a great one, 40 feet of stone and brick, its towers 60, that had turned away every army on earth. By 1453, the empire behind that wall had shrunk to the wall itself. A city of maybe 50,000 souls, defended by fewer than 8,000 men, ruled by an emperor with a great name and an empty treasury. Constantine, the 11th of that name, brave, patient, and penniless. I liked him. He had the manner of a man quietly paying his family's debts. Outside stood a sultan of 21. Mehmed, second of that name, who had wanted this city since boyhood, with the unembarrassed hunger boys usually spend on the sea. People called him young. Young is not the same as unready. Here is the detail history likes to forget, and I cannot, because I was in the room. A Hungarian cannon founder named Orban came to Constantinople first. He offered the emperor a new kind of gun, a monster, a thing to end the age of walls, and asked for a salary, a modest one. Constantine wanted it. Constantine could not pay it. The treasury of 1,000 years of Rome could not meet a gunsmith's wages. So Orban walked out of the room, out of the gate, across the lines, and sold the future to the Sultan instead, swearing he could cast a gun to bring down the walls of Babylon itself. Mehmed paid him 4 times what he asked. Orban cast it in bronze, 8 meters of it. It took 60 oxen to move. Its stone shot weighed as much as 8 men. The city did not lose an arms race. It declined to enter one because it could not imagine needing to. The wall had always held. Why buy the thing that ends walls? The siege began in the first week of April and lasted 53 days, and the great gun set the rhythm of those days like a terrible bell. It could fire only a handful of times a day. The bronze had to cool, and once it cracked, and had to be bound with iron and coaxed back into service, but each shot hit like a hill falling over. By day, the wall broke. By night, the city mended it with timber, earth, barrels, a soft patch on a stone body. And here is a strange thing. The mending worked. Earth swallows a cannonball better than stone does. For 7 weeks, the oldest wall in the world was rebuilt every night by candlelight, and every dawn it stood. The defenders were led by a Genoese soldier named Giustiniani, who was worth 1,000 men and knew it, and by the emperor himself, who slept in his armor near the weakest gate. The harbor was sealed off by a great chain, so Mehmed, and I still remember the sound of this, took his ships out of the sea and hauled them over a hill on greased timbers into the water behind the chain. A navy walking overland. That was the week the city's face changed. You can hold a wall against men. It is harder to hold it against imagination. Then the omens turned, and in that age, omens were logistics. On the 22nd of May, the full moon rose into eclipse, and the city remembered an old prophecy that Constantinople would stand while the moon stood full. Processions, the city's holiest icon slipping from its bearer's shoulders mid-procession, and a hailstorm scattering the marchers. Fog in May, so thick the dome of Hagia Sophia seemed to glow cold. You may call all of that weather and coincidence. I am simply telling you what it did to 8,000 exhausted men. It told them the story was ending. On the evening of the 28th of May, the churches filled, and in Hagia Sophia, Greek and Latin, priests who had refused to share an altar for 400 years sang one service together. Quarrels need a future to live in. I stood at the back under the great dome I had watched rise 9 centuries before and listened to the last evening of the Roman Empire being sung. Constantine asked forgiveness that night of everyone he had ever wronged. Then he rode to the wall. The assault came in the dark hours of the 29th in waves built to wear down a night-mended wall. First the irregulars, spent like coin, then the Anatolians, then at first light the Janissaries, fresh, silent, professional. The defenders had been fighting for hours by then. They held. I want that said plainly. They held again at the breach, behind their barrels and earth. The wall's last hour was one of its best. 2 things ended it, and neither one was the cannon. Giustiniani took a wound, the arm or the chest, accounts argue, and he was in armor, bleeding through it, and he asked to be carried to the ships. His men opened a gate in the inner wall to take him out. The defense saw its captain leave. Courage is a liquid. It drains through any opening. And in those same minutes, on the far flank, men said afterward that a small postern gate, the Cœur Portu, a door for sorties, a door the size of a memory, had been left unbarred after a night raid, and the first Ottoman soldiers simply walked through it and raised a banner on the tower above. I have heard it called treason, and I have heard it called a lie invented to explain the unbearable. I knew the man who kept a door like that. All I will say is this: after 53 nights without sleep, iron does what tired hands last told it to do, and empires are rarely stabbed. They are mislaid. The emperor was last seen at the breach, on foot, having thrown off everything that marked him as worth capturing. No man who saw him fall lived to tell it reliably. The Rome that began with a wolf and 2 brothers ended with a king dying anonymously in a doorway of his own wall, and I have never decided whether that is the saddest thing I know or the most fitting. There was a courtier in the city, a friend of the emperor's since childhood, named George Francis. He survived, and he wrote the day into his chronicle the way you drive a nail into a coffin lid. Dated, plain, exact. And then, at the end of the entry, he let one cry slip through.
On Tuesday, the 29th of May, early in the day, the Sultan took possession of our city. In this time of capture, my late master and emperor, Lord Constantine, was killed. I was not at his side at that hour. I had been sent by his orders to inspect another part of the city. Alas for me, I did not know what times Providence had in store for me.
Sent away by his orders on the last morning. Francis carried that for the rest of his life and set it down in the record where it belonged. One date, one death, one cry. That is what a chronicle is, grief filed correctly. The city did not burn to nothing. Cities taken by storm were given to 3 days of plunder. That was the law of the age. A city that yielded was spared, and Constantinople had refused to yield. Even so, Mehmet reined in much of it early, walked into Hagia Sophia, and stood a long time under the dome he had wanted all his life. The city changed hands and languages and prayers and lived. It lives now. You have walked its streets, perhaps, under other names, and the walls still stand, most of them, gapped where the great guns spoke. Tourists picnic in the breach. The fig trees hold the towers up. Every age since has been sure it would have done better, sure its own walls, steel, paper, digital, are of a different kind. No one in 1453 was a fool. They were heirs of the best defended city in human history, doing arithmetic that had been correct for 1,000 years. Here is what the wall taught me, and it took the whole 1,000 years to teach it. Nothing had ever beaten the wall, and that is exactly why the wall lost. A defense that has always held becomes invisible. You stop asking whether it will hold because it always has. Stone does not doubt. Doubting is the duty of the men who stand on it, and after 1,000 quiet years, that duty is the first stone to crumble. What has always held is not what will always hold. It is only what has not fallen yet, and the difference between those two sentences is 53 days. I have outlived every wall that was ever built. The only thing I have never once seen fall is the habit of trusting them. This is Petros's key. He gave it to me on the 28th of May, before the last service, because his hands were shaking and mine were not, and he meant to take it back in the morning. The door it fits stopped mattering on the morning of the 29th. He never came for it, and I have kept it oiled for him 500 years and more, because a kept promise is a small wall of its own, and mine hold. They are gone, the emperor, the gatekeeper, the singers under the dome. Remember one of them standing in the breach at first light, knowing, Constantine will do. The last of 1,100 years of emperors, and he died at the wall like a soldier whose name nobody checked. Beside this candle, in the dark, a page is already waiting, pulled from a river that ran black for days, not with blood, with ink. A city once drowned its books before it drowned its people, and I stood on the bank and read the water. They called the city Baghdad. Come and see what the world forgot it knew. The candle stays lit.